For centuries, the divine feminine has quietly carried the weight of nurturing, healing, and holding space for families, communities, and even broken systems. She has been the unseen force behind compassion, intuition, and creation. But what happens when she's done? When she's no longer willing to pour from an empty cup, to soften every blow, to remain silent in the name of peace? What happens when she rises, not to comfort, but to confront? A seismic shift begins. The balance of power, love, and truth starts to realign. This is not about anger or revenge, it's about reclamation. When the divine feminine is done, everything changes. Not because she breaks the world, but because she stops holding it up alone. The end of nurturing without boundaries. The divine feminine has long been revered as the embodiment of unconditional love, compassion, and care. She is the womb of creation, the healer, the empath, the ever-giving heart. But there comes a moment, a sacred turning point, when even this limitless force of love must draw a line. This moment is not a collapse of her essence, but an evolution of it. When the divine feminine is done nurturing without boundaries, she reclaims the energy that was once freely given to the undeserving, the ungrateful, and the unaware. She no longer allows her love to be mistaken for weakness, nor her patience for permission. She no longer carries others at the expense of her own soul. This shift doesn't come with rage, it comes with clarity. She begins to choose where her energy flows, no longer feeding what drains her. Relationships, systems, and dynamics that once thrived on her self-abandonment begin to crumble. Those who depended on her silence are forced to face the echo of her absence. The end of boundaryless nurturing is not the end of love. It is the beginning of sacred, sovereign love. Love that includes herself. It is a love that says, "I will not bleed to keep you warm. I will not mother what refuses to grow. I will not soften so you never have to face yourself." And in that moment, the world begins to change. Not through conflict, but through recalibration. The divine feminine returns to her throne, not as a servant, but as a sovereign. And from this place, she teaches the greatest lesson of all. Real love honors the self as much as it honors the other, from sacrifice to sovereignty. When the divine feminine is done, everything changes. There is a sacred threshold. Many women, and all who embody the divine feminine, are now crossing. For lifetimes, the feminine has been praised for her willingness to give, to serve, to sacrifice. She has poured endlessly from her heart, her body, her time, her spirit, nurturing others while starving parts of herself. This was once seen as strength, to endure, to carry the burdens of others, to be the constant, the healer, the gentle one, in a world built on dominance and imbalance. But beneath the surface of this noble identity was a subtle message. You are most valuable when you are giving yourself away. That era is ending. A quiet revolution is rising within the feminine soul. It does not scream, it does not demand, but it is undeniable. It is a remembrance. A remembering of who she was before she was conditioned to please, to comply, to soften every edge of her truth. A remembering that her worth was never meant to be proven through exhaustion, martyrdom, or silence. This is the return of sovereignty. Sovereignty is not about control. It is not resistance for the sake of rebellion. It is the sacred alignment of self, mind, body, spirit, and soul rooted in wholeness. It is the embodiment of a woman who no longer needs to abandon herself to be loved, accepted, or seen. When the divine feminine moves from sacrifice to sovereignty, she stops saying yes to what drains her life force. She no longer makes herself small to make others comfortable. She protects her peace with sacred boundaries, not guilt. She gives from overflow, not obligation. She chooses rest without apology. She speaks her truth even when her voice shakes. She honors her intuition as divine guidance, not irrational emotion. And this changes everything. In her relationships, she no longer plays roles that require her to shrink. In her career, she stops tolerating spaces that exploit her labor or mute her leadership. In her spirituality, she reconnects with the goddess within, not a deity outside of her, but the eternal force she has always carried in her bones. This transformation is uncomfortable for the world that benefited from her sacrifice. It disrupts codependent dynamics. It disturbs systems rooted in patriarchy. It asks others to grow or fall away. But it is not her role to carry what refuses to evolve. Because sovereignty is not a rejection of love, it is the refinement of it. The sovereign feminine teaches us that love without self-respect is not love, that giving without balance is depletion, that true compassion begins with the self. And in claiming this truth, she redefines power, not as domination, but as presence, not as force, but as embodiment. She becomes magnetic, not because she seeks attention, but because she stands whole in her essence. She becomes a mirror, revealing to others their own disowned power. And she becomes a portal, calling in a new way of being, where the sacred feminine and masculine can meet in mutual respect, not hierarchy. When the divine feminine is done sacrificing, she doesn't close her heart, she reclaims it. She no longer bleeds to prove she's worthy. She realizes she was never meant to be the offering. She is the altar, and from this place of radiant sovereignty, she doesn't just heal herself, she heals the world. The collapse of false structures. When the divine feminine withdraws her consent. There are systems, roles, and realities that exist not because they are true or just, but because they have been agreed to. For centuries, the divine feminine has silently upheld structures built on imbalance, unspoken expectations, emotional labor, spiritual suppression, and the illusion of control dressed up as tradition. But that agreement is breaking, and when the divine feminine is done, when she withdraws her silent compliance, false structures begin to fall. They were never real to begin with. They were scaffolds built on fear, hierarchy, domination, and the suppression of the intuitive, emotional, creative, and cyclical nature of life. These structures have ruled religions, families, institutions, economies, and even inner narratives, defining worth by productivity, value by visibility, and love by obedience. The divine feminine has long been the hidden foundation of these systems. She fed them with her time, her care, her magic, and her silence. Not because she agreed with them, but because she was taught she had no other choice. Now, she is awakening. She is remembering her power to unchoose. And that, more than anything, is what unravels the old world. When she is done, performing roles she never chose just to be acceptable, holding peace at the expense of truth, embodying ideals that deny her wild, cyclical, emotional, and sacred self, smiling through pain to make others comfortable, maintaining illusions so others don't have to grow. Then the lies cannot hold. Her no is not cruel. it is clarifying. It reveals who only loved her compliance, not her essence. It exposes where power was dependency in disguise. It reveals how much of what seemed normal was never natural, only normalized. This collapse is not chaos, it is liberation. When she no longer props up what drains her, the energetic infrastructure of false realities begins to crack. The illusion that productivity is more sacred than presence, that hierarchy is more valuable than harmony, that logic is more important than wisdom. These begin to rot from the inside out. And yes, people will panic. Systems will resist. The world may call her selfish, ungrateful, angry, or too much. But what they're really saying is, you're no longer easy to control. To that, she does not apologize. She breathes, she anchors, she returns to herself. From the ashes of the false, the true emerges. New structures rooted in balance, reciprocity, intuition, inclusivity, and soul-deep integrity begin to rise. Not because she built them alone, but because she stopped building what was never hers to carry. The divine feminine does not destroy to punish. She withdraws to recenter. She collapses falsehood to make space for what is real. The return of sacred balance. When the divine feminine rises, harmony is reborn. The final phase in the reclamation of the divine feminine is not war, it is balance. After the silence breaks, after the false falls away, after sacrifice gives way to sovereignty, something ancient stirs beneath the chaos. Equilibrium. The divine feminine was never meant to dominate, just as she was never meant to be dominated. Her rise is not a reversal of roles, it is a return to wholeness. When she reclaims her place, she is not seeking revenge or control. She is calling forth a long-lost harmony, a rhythm where the feminine and the masculine are no longer at odds, but dancing in sacred union. For too long, the world has leaned heavily on one side, on force over flow, control over connection, intellect over intuition. It has dismissed the soft as weak, the still as lazy, the emotional as irrational. It has taught us that power must be loud, that value must be proven, that love must be earned. But as the divine feminine rises in truth, not just in women, but in all beings, a rebalancing begins. In this balance, power becomes presence, not pressure. Leadership becomes listening, not ruling. Love becomes rooted, not conditional. Wisdom includes the unseen, not just the measurable. Creation honors cycles, not just constant growth. The sacred masculine, too, is invited to evolve, not to be erased, but to be restored to his true essence. The protector, not the controller. The builder, not the oppressor. The conscious warrior, not the wounded tyrant. When the divine feminine stands in her fullness, she does not shrink the masculine, she awakens it. This is the return of sacred balance. It's not a political trend or a passing idea, it's an ancient remembering in our bones, in our blood, in our collective soul. We are not meant to live in extremes. We are not meant to tear ourselves in two. We are meant to unify within and without. And so when the divine feminine is truly done with distortion, done with self-erasure, done with pleasing, performing, and persevering in systems that deny her, she doesn't just walk away. She calls everything home. In that moment, we do not return to the past. We rise into the future our ancestors dreamed of, one where power is shared, truth is honoured, and the sacred once again lives at the center of everything. This is not the end. This is the beginning of balance, of beauty, of becoming whole again.